Let's discuss this further now with Professor David Monyae, who's an associate professor in political science and international relations. He is also the director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, South Africa has been approached to play a mediation role in the Ukraine and Russia conflict. At the same time this afternoon, we're hearing the president and his Mozambican counterpart calling for a dialogue, saying that the UN needs to initiate this particular dialogue. I wonder, what are your thoughts on South Africa being asked to play this role?
I think this is a welcome development. It's good news for South Africa as we see South Africa moving from a non-aligned position to what we consider as a proactive neutrality in the sense that it can play a key role in reaching to the Russians. At the same time, it is also equally close to United States and Western countries. And therefore, I think it gives the country an upper hand working with all important institutions, particularly United Nations, the EU and NATO. It can play that back door, reaching out to President Putin and all other important players.
And earlier we saw the Democratic Alliance meeting with the Ukrainian ambassador in South Africa. Now, DA leader John Steenhuisen says to be an excellent mediator, it requires you to be an honest broker, and South Africa should get on the right side and condemn Russia. And he was also alluding to the fact that there is going to be a debate in this regard in Parliament next week in order to force South Africa to be able to make its stance very clear in this particular matter. I wonder, what does that tell us, though, because our foreign policy calls for a dialogue?
Indeed, I think there's just a misunderstanding on part of the DA, and it's unfortunate that it comes to a party that is considered to be pro-white and pro-Western world. There's a lack of thinking on their part from a party politics. But from a national perspective, it is also quite bad for the DA to come openly taking sides as the way it is doing. When it comes to foreign relation and foreign diplomats, political parties are supposed to be in line with the national and debate issues in parliament and differ in a number of other platforms. Facing the world, I think South Africa should and must speak with one voice, and that position of neutrality allows South Africa, it gives South Africa an upper hand. It's a country that is pro-human rights. It's consistent on assisting global peace and security. And therefore, there could be other roles that DA could play instead of openly and nakedly siding with the foreign power against. So it might also be a government. I don't think it would be good for ANC or any other party openly opposing each other in the eyes of foreign nations and governments, particularly embassies.
And Prof, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on one of the questions that arose during that brief discussion with the DA leader as well as the Ukrainian ambassador. And it was a question of a possible double of standards by one of my SABC colleagues. Let's take a listen.
I don't agree that war and aggression is a solution to any of the problems that we face around the world. And if anybody can demonstrate the fact that negotiation and peace-seeking and consensus-seeking is the best way to resolve your problems, I think South Africa is the shining beacon of that example. As relates to the Middle East, what we cannot reduce every conflict to is about whataboutism. Because then what you're doing is equating situations in different parts of the world with different dynamics and using it as an excuse not to condemn wrongdoing. There have been numerous debates in the parliament behind me on the situation in the Middle East. Mr. Mandela has brought many motions to the floor of parliament around the situation in the Middle East. We've debated it ad nauseum. The ANC have had a lot to say about the Middle East, which is frankly outside of our sphere of influence and which has very little impact on South Africa. It is a completely different situation with Ukraine. South Africa is a major exporter to the European Union. South Africa is a major importer of Ukraine's produce, particularly grains and basic foodstuffs and cooking oil, and is going to be absolutely devastated, particularly poor South Africans, by the rising cost of food and fuel over the coming weeks and months in South Africa.
And Prof, that was a question, of course, asked about why the Democratic Alliance is not coming out to strongly also condemn the United States when it comes to the conflict in Iraq, and also bringing up the issue of the Middle East as well. I wonder, what is your take on what you've just heard?
A clear-cut double standards. He demonstrated a lack of understanding of foreign policy and failure to advance his own argument. On one hand, he made it quite clear that South Africa is protecting its interests because the European Union is important, and equally so, Russia is important to South Africa. We have to balance the two in a way not divorced from our own norms and values, that is people-centered, human rights, and ensure that we are born out of a mediation. Diplomacy was at the key bringing in 1994 and the role that South Africa can play. And therefore, one would have expected DA to fully understand all these dynamics and support the government on this particular position.